Today I want to help you make any snare sound great, and I promise as long as the snare isn't actually broken, it is very easy to do. I have a lot of snares and I get a fair amount of comments asking how I tune them, and the reality is that I end up tuning most of them pretty similarly, and it rarely takes longer than like a minute to tune up a new snare for me. So the first thing I do is I set up the bottom head, and I gotta be honest, these days I almost always tune my snares by feel. And when I say by feel, I mean that I'm feeling the amount of tension I'm getting from the tension rod, and then I'm also feeling with my thumbs, I'm actually physically feeling the head and how much resistance I'm getting near each tension rod. Now, that's not necessarily helpful for you because you can't feel exactly what I'm feeling for, but I tend to end up getting around to the same place pitch-wise, which is about here. I'm trying to get to that point where the bottom head starts to sound like a timbale. So somewhere right around here. You can use that as a reference. And in fact, I got a couple other snares behind me. Let's just see where their bottom heads have ended up. A little lower. That's usually what I'm going for. So like I said, I don't really use the TuneBot when I'm tuning snares, but for your reference, the bottom head here, which is pretty close to where I like to dial it in, I'm seeing 188, which is F sharp. Now you can go around to each lug and just check kind of the relative pitches to each other. This is what everyone tells you to do. But this might be sacrilege, but with the snare, I actually don't do that sort of fine tuning as often unless I'm really having a problem. My personal experience has been that the snare specifically, and specifically the bottom head, especially at high tensions, tends to be fairly forgiving for little differences between the lugs. So what I actually do is I go around and I feel with my thumbs to feel if one tension rod seems significantly looser or has more give than the other. So I'm actually kind of feeling over on this side of the drum like it's a little bit looser. So I'm just gonna go and tune them up a little bit. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason to this other than kind of roughly trying to get to a certain feeling and that pitch that I showed you a minute ago. Okay, so once we're there, I'm gonna switch to the top head. So with the top head, I tend to go medium high, and again, unfortunately for you, I tend to go by feel, both the feeling of the drum key on the tension rod and a little bit by the actual feeling of the drum head itself. But the references I can give you is that I tend to get about here. I'm gonna hold the bottom head, and the top head sounds about like that. Let me hit the center. And next to the lugs. Now at this point, especially with the top head, I may do a little more fine tuning and going back and forth between the lugs. I might just quickly go around. And again, I'll admit that I don't go crazy with the fine tuning, but I am looking for the general balance of the head, and if it seems like a couple of lugs are significantly lower, significantly higher than others. So I feel like there is a lug or two that I could bring up, like this one, get my balance a little bit better. Quick tip I'll give you that can save you a lot of headache is if you find two lugs that are at different pitches, maybe one is lower and you want to bring it up, there is a connection between tension rods that are directly across from each other. So you might be cranking on one and it doesn't seem to get any higher, or you crank on one and it brings the one next to it up as well. So they're kind of chasing each other up the ladder. Oftentimes, this is not an uncommon thing for me, I will find that it's actually the lug across from the one that I want to bring up in pitch that needs to come up. So anytime I find a lug that I think needs to come up or down in pitch, I will also check the one directly across from it because there's an equal chance that that's actually the one you need to be focusing on. All right, so my TuneBot setting for the top head here is 214, which is A. And once again, if you don't have a TuneBot, here's just the pitch reference of the center of the head. And hitting next to the tension rod. Okay, so here's an important part. When you are setting up your snares, if your snares are set up correctly, you should be able to tension them so that at your lowest dynamic, when you are hitting as soft as possible, you can still hear the snare wires. So, hitting very softly there, you can even just tap with your finger. You want to still hear the snares. And you'll hear that if I go too high, I'm turning up my snare tension here, and especially with the stick, you'll hear if I go too high, hopefully you can hear that through the microphone, but I'm not just hearing snares anymore, I'm hearing this tone. That is my first troubleshooting tip, and if you are hearing that, that means that you have choked your snare wire, so you want to back it off. Until that pitch goes away and you're just hearing snare wires. And ideally, you should be able to play at your loudest dynamic and not have it sound super buzzy. Now, if you just tried doing that with your snares and it didn't work, you need to reset your snare wires. There are lots of videos on how to do this. I'm happy to make one if you guys want my input on how to reset the snare wires. I'm not gonna do it here because it's a little more involved. Really doesn't take that long once you've got it down, but making sure that your snare wires are set up correctly to begin with, that is key to getting your snare sound quickly and easily. I should also mention that from here, if I'm going up or down in pitch, I rarely touch the bottom head or the snare wires even. Typically, I'm just messing with the top head, and I might just do like one crank down on the two lugs nearest to me, or I will make little adjustments all the way around the drum, either down or up until I get the pitch that I'm looking for. I'm also no stranger to muffling, so if you're finding that your snare is too ringy for what you're going for, that's fine. You can just put some tape on it, or moon gel or snare weight or whatever you might have. Okay, so let's do this one more time, but I'm gonna go through the process in real time with you here. You might be thinking to yourself, all right, Cole, that's a very expensive Brady snare. Of course it's gonna sound good. Fair enough. So I went across the hall and I grabbed a Ludwig Universal over from West Coast Drum Shop. And this is just a solid, like basic kind of affordable snare from Ludwig. And I kind of messed it up before I grabbed it here. So let's just see what it sounds like right now. Yeah, that doesn't sound good. So, okay, in real time here, I'm just going to tune this up how I would on any given day. So, starting with the bottom head, and I'm just gonna start cranking, and I'm gonna go kind of in my star pattern here, and you'll notice I'm not checking the pitch. I am not even lifting up the snare wires. I'm just going by feel of the key, first of all, which again, I understand doesn't really help you that much, but I will give you that pitch reference at the end. So I'm just kind of cranking it up by feel until I'm getting a decent amount of resistance. I'm just gonna check and make sure, oh, yeah, I missed these ones. Not uncommon for me to miss a set of lugs there. Okay, I'm just going around and I'm just making sure that everything feels relatively similar tension-wise. And if something like that felt a little low, I'm just gonna bring it up a little bit. That felt significantly lower, right? Just bringing them all up. About here, okay? And the pitch now, let's see where it's at. It's probably fairly similar to my other snares. Now I'm just gonna feel the head with my fingers, and like these ones over here feel a little bit loose to me. I think I can give them, yep, a little bit more love. Yeah, I think this whole side of the head, honestly, I did not do quite as evenly, okay? And I'm just gonna hit it again. Okay, I will then flip it over, check the top head, snares off. Actually, I'm kind of curious to see what it sounds like just by fixing the bottom head. And didn't sound terrible, but the snares are not where they should be. So at this point, I might actually work on the snares first. Now that I've got the bottom head dialed in, let me just see what it sounds like when I get the snares to their correct tension. So So you'll see I'm going through, all I'm doing is I'm just tapping as lightly as possible in the center and then just waiting until those snares tighten up. And I'm making sure to not over tighten to the point where it starts going boom, 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 boom. Right about there, okay. That actually doesn't sound bad. I would call that about medium, and for me, most of the time, I probably go a little bit higher than this. So if the head doesn't sound super wonky or out of tune, then I will typically, if I'm just bringing it up a little bit, I don't even worry about the star pattern. I will just go around in a circle here, and I'm, again, just going for a familiar feeling of tension on the key first. Okay, now I'm just gonna do kind of a cursory check. Fairly even, great. And now what's it sound like? Sounds great. So that's really all there is to it. You heard that this thing sounded like crap a second ago, and it didn't really take me longer than a minute or two to get it sounding like this, which I think is pretty good. So I really hope this helps. My process is rarely much more involved than what I just showed you there. If you have any clarifying questions, please let me know in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. I'm also happy to follow up with any other details you might be interested in, like how to set up the snare wires, that sort of thing. So let me know. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.